Welcome to the Weekend Primetime. Tonight, President Trump is threatening new tolls on the Strait of Hormuz if a deal isn't reached with Iran in the next 60 days. Quote, there will be no tolls in the Hormuz Strait for 60 days during the ceasefire period, and there will be no tolls after the 60-day period has expired unless they are imposed by and for the United States of America. Now, this comes as the next 24 hours are crucial in these ongoing negotiations. U.S. and Iranian officials are set to meet in Switzerland tomorrow for highly anticipated talks. And today, Iran dealt a blow to the United States by declaring the Strait of Hormuz is closed, citing Israel's ongoing strikes in Lebanon. U.S. Central Command disputed this shortly after, saying that ship traffic in the strait actually increased and that the U.S. forces have continued operating in the general area to support freedom of navigation. Real-time data from the strait does appear to show some cargo vessels getting through today. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance confirmed on Fox earlier today that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner were already on the ground in Switzerland dealing with some of the technical elements of this negotiation. The vice president is also on his way over now. Here's what he told reporters just an hour ago before taking off.
Level political leadership at the top, and then obviously the second meeting to stand ground. I might like to stay in what appears to be a beautiful place. I can only be there for a day or two. I think we're going to hopefully make progress on the nuclear issue, make progress on the Lebanon ceasefire issue. Those are the two big things that I think we're going to be focused on. I'm sure the Iranians are going to have issues they'd like to discuss as well.
Well, Eamon, the second you start to feel hopeful that maybe the war is over and the world economy is going to recover and perhaps people in the region will start having electricity at 24 hours a day.
It is a mess.
Yes.
I mean, I think the only word I can think of to describe the situation that we're in is a complete mess. There's probably a stronger word that I can use, but I can't use it. I can't use it on the air. But the reality of the situation, and you get a glimpse of that in the comments that J.D. Vance made just an hour or so ago. The two issues that are crystallizing right now that are really breaking down is, one, we can't agree on what is actually happening on the ground. The military says the Straits of Hormuz are open. Iran says it's closed, right? So put that on the side. We don't even know what the reality is on the situation. It's depending on who you want to believe and what is actually playing. But more importantly, what you're seeing there is that the vice president is going to Switzerland to talk about the negotiations, which we were on February 27th. So really, he wants to just go back to February 27th and start negotiating from where we left off. The assumption is that perhaps Iran is in a weaker position, so they're gonna offer up more concessions than they were doing on February 27th. Highly unlikely. And the reason why I say that is because of what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. But the more important thing, I think, that is getting lost in all this is what is happening with Israel. There are almost now two parallel sets of negotiations happening. The United States and Iran about the war in Iran, but then the negotiations that are taking place between the United States and Israel about whether or not Israel can be a part of this deal. And we got a glimpse of that a little bit this week. And there seems to be some anger that is exploding into the public here. And I want to play for you Donald Trump and J.D. Vance talking about Israel and this position with Lebanon. Take a listen to what they've been saying.
If it weren't for the United States of America, with me, because Obama was the opposite, Israel would not exist right now. Israel would have been blown off the face of the earth, 100%. And every smart person in Israel knows that.
Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
And the reason why I chose those two sound bites just to highlight is because it's very rare for American officials at that level to be so critical of the Israeli government. There have been differences. We've seen that in the past. But for American officials to come out and be so critical of Israel's positions and the way it is behaving and the fact that it is not being grateful or complying with what America wants for its interests in this situation speaks volumes. And we're hearing just the same from Israeli officials against the American government. I mean, Israeli press have said that Donald Donald Trump has betrayed Israel, that this is, a Chamberlain moment kind of acquiescing to Hitler. And so I think there's very strong divisions that are emerging on whether or not Israel will comply with what America would like it to do when it comes to the issue of Lebanon. So these two things are playing out simultaneously.
Well, they're not wrong that it doesn't seem like we got a lot for this surrender. I mean, Donald Trump promised a surrender. I don't know exactly who is surrendering at this point, given that the terms of what we have seem to fall quite short of the JCPOA, which Donald Trump once declared to be the worst deal ever. And meanwhile, of course, here in the United States and abroad, there are huge costs to this war so far. There have been a bunch of news stories in the past few days that are like, I think they were originally written as a sort of post-mortem, like, oh, the war is over. Let's now take stock of what everything cost. Now, of course, those tallies are rising. But let me just read you some of the costs that we have endured so far. So let's start out with the most important cost, the human costs. We have 13 Americans, U.S. service members, dead, 60 Israelis dead, more than 3,300 Iranians passed away, 3,700 Lebanese people who have died. So again, human costs, most important thing. Now let's talk about the more crass question of the dollars and cents here. The U.S. military cost so far, this is actually as of a month ago. Yeah. And at the time, a month ago, it was thought
questionable.
To be, it was thought to be a conservative estimate, and probably an underestimate, $29 billion. The additional U.S. military budget ask, according to reporting that we've seen in recent days, is an extra $80 billion. And these numbers do not appear to apply to or include the costs of the U.S. bases that have been damaged, for example. Then you have Iranian assets that are being unfrozen, at least $6 billion, although that seems to be a moving target. I pulled that number earlier today, and I think the number has since gotten higher. The Iran reconstruction costs as part of the MOU, at least $300 billion that the United States and other countries are supposed to cobble together. Then let's talk about the other costs to the U.S. economy, not just to the U.S. budget. You have U.S. extra gas and diesel costs to date are at $61 billion. That's how much more Americans have had to pay at the pump, precisely because prices have gone up because of this war. And then an all-in estimate for what it has cost the U.S. economy, $132 billion. That's from Moody's Economics. So you put all that together, we've clearly sunk a lot. I'm not even going through like the military stockpile and things like that.
Or fertilizer.
Exactly. Like there are things that I've left off this list. We have spent so much money. We have spent blood and treasure, as have other countries. And what do we have to show for it, I think, is the real question.
I think that's a very good question. I think it's one that the American people have been asking, and the political pressure that they were putting on Donald Trump from the MAGA movement, from the base. And that's why he was so desperate to make a deal, and make a deal that's not a great deal, but it was a dumb war, and we had to make a dumb deal to try to get out of it. And right now, we're dealing with trying to suture that back together.
Do you think, though, from within the Republican Party, the fracture is as visible as we are seeing it from the outside? Do you think that the critiques of the way that Donald Trump has handled this war, and certainly among his voters and his supporters, who felt that he had promised them no new wars, no more entanglements, no wasted lives and no wasted money.
America first.
America first.
I think it's a pretty big seismic moment within the whole Republican movement, because this has always been a marriage of convenience. The foreign policy elites, the more neocon, hawkish wing of the party, with the MAGA, more libertarian, more grassroots, not wanting any new wars as long as they felt like the American economy wasn't where it needed to be. And so there's always been that tension there. And Trump managed to smooth it over for a while. But when he went along with this war, this pointless war that the country and the world called BS on, that's when you really see things go up into flames. And also the destruction of our relationship with Israel, which I think that the Israelis do not even understand the extent to the American political situation and dynamics that they have stirred, and they probably aren't going to be able to clamp down on.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the other part of this, Catherine, is that when you look at the stock market, it seems like the business community is just kind of like clamoring on for any sense of hope, right? Like as soon as there's an announcement, even if it hasn't materialized yet, the stock market rallies, everyone gets excited. If people think there's going to be some relief in the system, and then here we are at the end of the week where we'll see how the markets open tomorrow or things go into the week looking like. But certainly that hope that began on Monday seems to be dissipating now, given what has transpired today. Yeah,
and markets seem to be conditioned to buy the dip. It's like when there's good news, they rocket up. When there's bad news, they go down a little bit, and then they go back up.
Right.
And I just don't know how sustainable that is. I think markets have been pretty resilient despite a lot of bad things that happen in this
economy. And Donald Trump lets us know whenever there's a record break in the market.
And also how sustainable when the debt is out of control, and this war has only added to that debt.